You're listening to Boobies and Newbies, brought to you by the Frolic Podcast Network. Welcome to Boobies and Newbies, the podcast that asks novice romance readers to think outside the dick in a box and brave the unbridled world of erotica. I'm your host, Kelly Reynolds, and it is time for another Steamy Spotlight author interview. Joining me today are two of my favorite friends from the Twitter sphere who just so happen to also be two fantastic authors. It's Sarah Smith, author of the previously reviewed on this podcast, Simmer Down, and Skye McDonald, author of the Anti-Belle series, who you might also remember from our discussion of romance novel covers way back when. Together, they host the Quick and Dirty Romance podcast, and now they've joined forces to write their first romance together under the nom de plume Sarah Skye. Here to discuss their first book together, Sips and Strokes, please join me in welcoming Sarah and Skye.
Hi! Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, we're excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you, and I have to tell you that this is my first time interviewing two authors in one podcast episode, so I think the best way to begin would be if you each introduce yourselves for the listeners and maybe share one of your favorite recent romance reads, and then that way they can get to know each of your voices. So Skye, how about we start with you first?
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm very honored to be your first time, Kelly.
Thank you.
Two at once. So I'm very excited for that. But no, I'm Skye McDonald. I'm the author of the Anti-Belle series, as you said, currently 3 books strong, and very excited on this new project with Sarah. My books are contemporary romances set in Nashville, Tennessee. Each one of them is a standalone book, but they are all connected in the Anti-Belle world. And the best new romance that I have read recently, I am obsessed with Eve Casey's All In series. Ooh. I have not gotten to the third one, but the first one is Falling Like Stars, and the second one is Fighting Gravity, and I have adored both of them. So that is my current obsession in terms of romance reads.
Oh, and as somebody who has not read either of those, can you tell me just sort of like what it's about, or like what the tropes are, to see if it's something that would fit my reading habits?
Of course. So the first one is Falling Like Stars, and they're all centered around, very similar to kind of how I do my series, where you meet the characters, the side characters become main characters. They're centered around a luxury space travel business.
Oh my God.
Built, right? And so in the first one, we meet Elle, the main character, who is part of the like hospitality crew, and she and the astronaut fall in love. And it's a bit of a sort of, I don't want to call it rivals or enemies to lovers, but there is a sort of kind of hate to love kind of thing that happens there. He is Chinese, and there is a multicultural element where he's not sure if he can stay in the country. I don't want to spoil anything, but it's very, very interesting and quite nicely both like astronomy and geeky, but also very, very steamy. So I love it all. And in the second book, we see the head of the corporation falling for the architect, and her baggage and her image and self-worth really come into play about whether or not she can trust enough to love, which is a huge piece in a lot of my books too. So it's another kind of trope that I'm always in on as a woman, being able to trust herself enough to fall in love. So that one is also like delightfully like soulful and also very, very romantic and steamy. And I have not gotten to the third one yet, but I'm super excited to do so.
Well, first of all, I think that sounds incredible. And I can honestly say I don't know if I've ever read a romance about a luxury space travel company. So that is amazing. Secondly, I think people should hire Skye to write their synopses, because that was like so well-rounded. Like, I wish I was that put together when I was giving a synopsis. So well done on both accounts.
Well, thank you so much, because I was sweating bullets making sure I got it right. I was like, oh God, how am I going to sum this up? But no, it's really good. And being a massive like Star Wars and sci-fi geek myself, like I love that play of like smartness in with the romance. I think it's great.
I do too. I'm going to have to check those out. Awesome. Sarah, over to you.
Yeah, I'm Sarah Smith, obviously, and I'm the author of Baker, Simmer Down, and If You Never Come Back. And so I guess the book that I just finished reading that I really enjoyed is The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas.
Ooh.
It's a really fun one. It's like an enemies to lovers. They work together in an office. And the main character, Catalina, she needs a date for her sister's wedding because one of the groomsmen is her ex. So she lassos her coworker, who is super hot, but he's kind of a jerk, to go with her. And it's a really steamy, broody. I really enjoyed it. Highly recommend if you like those tropes.
Why is it that in romance we're never allowed to be single to go to a wedding?
Right? Yeah, it's not. I don't know, but it makes for a really good setup, a really satisfying and exciting setup.
Oh yeah, no, fake dating is one of my favorite tropes, which should, it plays in perfectly to the book we're going to talk about today. But it's so funny that I feel like so often it's that we have to she's got to find a date to the wedding, she's got to find a date to this. And I'm like, girl, it's okay for you to go places by yourself. Like, don't feel stressed.
No, I totally agree.
Yeah, and also for the bride and groom, that's just more money. Like, let's be practical here. You're just dragging somebody in, and that's another $100. Come on.
That's so true. Like, my friend, when she was getting married and I was a bridesmaid in her wedding, she asked us very early on. She's like, okay, which one, like, who wants to bring a date? Like, one of them is married, so she obviously has like a husband to bring. And then like other people would like campaign for whether or not they got to bring dates. And I'm just like, I'm good. It's okay. I'll save you the money. Can I have like a nice bedroom at the hotel? So needless to say, I was the favorite.
Goes without question.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, well, before we talk about your lovely book that you've written together, I would love to know about each of your romance origin stories. So, how did you come into reading romance? And even bigger question, do you remember the first romance novel you read?
Sarah, do you want to start? I'm thinking.
I can start. So, I have been reading romance for a really long time, pretty much ever since I was a kid, and I was sneaking my auntie's romance novels from her because she was staying with us at the time, and she had a bunch of books in my closet because that's where she was storing her stuff. And obviously I'm like 9 and I'm super curious, and these covers look like really scandalous, so obviously I corrupted myself from a really young age. But I honestly don't remember what the name of that book was because it was so long ago, and I was reading it in secret, so I was reading it in chunks, obviously not in one continuous setting. But it was your classic, like, guy on the cover, his chest was exposed, super muscly, a woman in like a really billowy yellow dress. I remember that, and I just can't remember the title though, but that's my origin story.
But you remember the dress and you remember the naked chest.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Always there.
Yeah, absolutely. Skye, how about you?
Well, I remember reading like a Danielle Steele that I don't know where it came from or why it would have been in my house. My mom was not a big like novel reader anyway, and certainly not scandalous things. No. So like I think I came into the genre fairly late. I remember, I have to admit, 50 Shades was a gateway for me, but the one that I claim really hooked me into the genre is Beautiful Bastard by Christina Lauren. That was the one where like really like, okay, I'm in, give me more.
That's a good one to hook you too. That's a great hook.
It is. And it's funny because I feel like now, like the consent level and the whole boss power play, it almost like doesn't hold up, but I will still shamelessly read that because I still think it is a really fun, super steamy romance. I was all in after I read that one.
Yeah, well, and we talk about it all the time, but 50 Shades has been like a gateway for a lot of people into romance. So say what you want about the book and the quality of writing, but there has to be some thanks and acknowledgement as far as that goes.
Yes, I agree with that. I completely agree with that on every single point you just made.
Oh, good. I love when people agree with me. Now, how about writing? Obviously, Sarah, you got like a much earlier start of reading romance. So I'm curious, for both of you, when did your writing careers begin? And was romance something that you always thought about writing?
Yeah, it's funny because as long as I have loved writing romance, it never occurred to me, or sorry, maybe I misspoke. As long as I have enjoyed reading romance, it never occurred to me to write it until later on in life. I had always wanted to write a book. Like I was a journalism major in school. I loved English class, all that stuff. And so I think like that wasn't a unique thing to want to write a book. Like everybody around me, like our eventual goal was to write a book someday. And I just, in my, I think I was like 30, 31, I was just reading romance novels, and I read A Girl Like You by Gemma Burgess, and something in my head just clicked. I'm like, oh, I should try writing romance or a rom-com. And I did. And that was the first time I had ever finished a manuscript. So that's sort of when it like clicked in my head, like, oh, this is what I should be writing.
That's awesome. And Skye?
Well, when I was an early teenager, I was obsessed with like Sweet Valley books, which may date me. But okay. But I took to writing these epic sweeping sagas about friends in my spiral notebooks while I was listening to Delilah on the clock radio at night. Okay. So I used to write these big books, but I'm from the Bible Belt, and that's all due respect, but waiting until marriage was a big thing that I was told about when I was a young person. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't sexy books. It was just like everybody fell in love, but that was pretty much the end of it. But then so to get into writing, I did not think I was going to be a novelist. I did not have aspirations to be one. I've been a teacher for a long time. But at one point several years ago, I'm going to say it was about 2014, I just had this image in my head of two desks in a room. And this is like, I've said this a lot, but just sort of a story sprang up. And I've always loved love stories. So like the books or the saga that I wrote as a teenager, everybody fell in love with each other. But I always loved love stories, and it just became a love story, and it turned into Not Suitable for Work. So then all the stories just kind of kept falling out, and romance was very much a part of it. And of course my books, people say that they're quite steamy, and I'm like, oh yeah, I guess they are. But it was just kind of part of the story that I had. And so I just went with it.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad you did.
Oh, thank you.
I love that. It's always so interesting to me to hear, because I feel like so many authors of romance are, they have a similar story in that like they picked up somebody else's romance novel when they were younger, whether it was their aunt or their mom or their grandma or, whatever. But it's so funny how everybody just has such a different story. Like some people started writing when they were, 10 years old. I always wanted to be a writer, blah, blah, blah. But then others it came to so late in life. It's just so incredible that this community is so diverse in the ways that we all flocked to the genre. But it seems like once you find it, then you're there to stay.
Totally. And I love the way to build on that. I love the way that everybody can come to the genre, and, we have our classic tropes that are pulled upon, again and again, but so many different iterations can come out of it. So many fresh and interesting ideas. Like there's so much variety in what we create using these set of real life tropes, because that's how life is. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really beautiful too. So like what brought us to it, but then what every author is able to do with it. And it all boils down to the happily ever after, but how you get there is just so unique and interesting.
What do each of you, think that, to build off of what you're talking about, Skye, what are some of the tropes and styles that are unique to each of you that you think that you put into your writing that sets sort of your stories apart from others, that this is a Skye McDonald story or this is a Sarah Smith story? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. Honestly, I'm still trying to figure out what exactly my style is, but I can say that for me, there's always or almost always a masturbation scene with the female main character, which I think is good to have because I feel like it just historically, it's not really encouraged for girls or women to prioritize their self-pleasure. And I think that's really important to hopefully change that someday, because there are a lot of really negative things that can happen when you don't prioritize, or you feel like you're ashamed, or you feel like you can't find satisfaction. And that's not fun, So, and I know, my books are a tiny little part of, they're just like a drop in the pool of romance and books overall, but hopefully it can help normalize that it's okay to prioritize yourself. Also, female-focused oral sex and making sure that women have orgasms in their sexual encounters.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know if I'm only thinking of Simmer Down, but when I think of your book, Sarah, I think of yummy food. And again, this might just be Simmer Down, clouding my vision, but I definitely think of lots of yummy treats.
Bacon has yummy treats too, for sure.
Yes. Yeah. Food, obviously, the two things that I seem to care about are food and sex. So, yeah.
Those are two great things to care about. Why do you think I have this podcast? Oh gosh. How about you, Skye?
I think for mine kind of cross a funny line. I've been told, they're kind of heavily women's fiction in a way, and yet they are dual POV and they are very sexy, because there's a lot of character growth that has to happen for the main character. The woman has a lot of things that she has to deal with in terms of owning her self-worth, in terms of coming to terms with who she is before she can comfortably get into and accept the love that she has found. So that's a big piece of mine, is really seeing people step up to themselves before they can really let go and fall in love. Nashville is a huge component, which is my hometown. And that is always that, plus the music scene there, not country music, really not almost at all, but the music that comes out of Nashville and the place and the vibrancy of the city is definitely a big force in the books. And then, of course, I guess for me, not food, but each one of my ladies has a drink that they drink. And so most of them, most of them are whiskey, although later in the books you get your cocktail gals and all the different things. But the first three, each one of them has a very a specific whiskey that is their go-to. So that's a part of it too.
Oh yeah. I knew the second I read whiskey in Sips and Strokes, I was like, oh, there's Skye.
Enter Skye.
I love that. Well, and I will say one of the things that I really love in your books, and it kind of ties into the personal health and wellness element, is that you talk about, you don't shy away from talking about mental health and going to therapy. And that's something I heard you discuss with my gal Becky on Too Stupid to Live as well. And that's something that I want to see highlighted in a lot more romance in the future.
Yeah. Actually, two of the three of my characters in Not Suitable for Work, Celeste, and in Nemesis, Liv, they actually each both meet with a therapist for very different reasons. But yes, I think everyone should have a therapist when it pleases them. I think the mental health stigma in this country is the beating heart of many of our social issues. Yeah. And I think there's absolutely nothing wrong at all with, it's sort of kind of building on what Sarah was saying about the shame that we try to embed in women for pleasure, the shame or the stigma of the idea that something is wrong if you need someone to talk to. There is nothing wrong. Everyone needs an objective person to talk to. I think it's a wonderful thing.
Well, and during a pandemic when we've all been spending the better part of a year, many of us alone in our homes, this I can see where this is the time that people need someone to talk to more so than ever. Another thing people are doing to cope is masturbating. So I think there's some merit to each of your books during the pandemic.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Masturbating and therapy, like
and
we
food.
could solve
And food.
and maybe a little drink in moderation. I don't want to encourage over drinking, but a good whiskey, a good self-care session. Yes, we could solve a lot of the world's problems right here, ladies.
Like literally,
so
this
agree.
is describing the last 6 months of my life right here.
Yes.
Oh, so good. Good times. But okay, well, we know each of you individually now. I'd love to know about Sarah Skye, from Sarah and Skye to Sarah Skye, because I think the two of you have what I would think of as the quintessential digital platonic love story. And so I'd love for people to know, first of all, how you became friends, and secondly, how that friendship transitioned into, building a writing partnership together.
I remember meeting Skye on Twitter as part of like the Twitter romance writing community. And I remember like liking her tweets and just really being drawn to her because she has a great online presence and she's really fun. And I think that totally like translates on social media too. Mm-hmm. And I remember that she had put out or she had tweeted something about needing like a critique partner or beta reader for something. And so I slid into her DMs and I said,
yeah.
I'm totally I said, yes, I'm here. I'll read your stuff. And I think that was not suitable for work. What ended up being not suitable for work. And I think we just really hit it off from there. Like we were beta reading for each other. And then we just became really good friends after that process. And then we definitely, vented and supported each other through like publishing process that we both went through. We met in person in Nashville in 2019. That was really, really fun. It is the quintessential platonic romance, Skye, because I love you. I'm deeply in love with you.
Oh, I love this.
I love you so much. And it's so funny that you say that because when we were teasing the announcement of the book, we kept saying like, we've got a big announcement, guys. And I ended up finally saying, people either are going to know that it's a book or they're going to think we're announcing we're getting married. Like, it's one or the other at this point. Like,
and you know what? They would believe either one. Either one would be a great announcement.
I would be proud of either one. I'm going to say it. Yes. Sarah's 100% right. That is exactly how we met. And her feedback was exactly what I wanted and needed. And I was proud and honored to give her the same kind of treatment for Faker and Simmer Down. And it has been a beautiful relationship. And she at some point said, hey, you want to do a podcast together? So then Quick and Dirty Romance was born. So we've been doing that. I remember, I don't know if I've told you this, Sarah, but I remember exactly where I was when you called me to tell me you got your publishing deal.
Are you serious? You remember that?
I was out on the town in Nashville all by myself. I was going to hear like a live band or something all on my own, and you had called me, and I was so excited for you. Aww. And I could hear just like the joy in your voice. I was so, so excited for you. And that was a very strange time in my life, but it was like super, it was like, this is wonderful. I'm so glad for her. But I actually like remember being out in Nashville and you calling, and I was like so thrilled for you. Yeah, no, it has been just an absolute honor and pleasure. I love you very, very much. It has been such a wonderful thing. Like, it would not be nearly as fun to be doing any of this. And this whole thing is fun. Romance is fun. The Bookstagram community is fun. But Sarah, really, like, you make it shine for me. I mean, it's just so much more fun having a partner in crime, someone to vent to, someone to collaborate with. It's wonderful.
Oh, that means a lot. Yeah, I thank you so much, Skye. And seriously, like this, I don't think this would have worked with anyone else other than Skye, because we are friends, and I feel like we do. We must just naturally like get along well, and we collaborate well, and our styles are compatible enough that Like, I don't think we hit snags in the way that other people would if they were to try to write a book together. I'm not saying that we're the greatest co-author team that has ever lived, but I'm saying
hey,
we're pretty good.
say it, go for it, put it out there.
You're not saying it. No, it's true, and like that's part of why both reading your work or like reading for critique for each of us, like there is not a time when it's like I take no offense to anything. It's just like the way that like our communication style is so similar, even if something isn't working or we're not like, we're not always like yes and yes. It's like the feedback is actually incredibly useful. It's just that I guess like our vibe is so similar that it's like no, I hear you on that. That's really useful, right? It's never like well, this isn't working.
I was gonna say, be honest. Who gives the meaner feedback?
What's so funny is that I can't handle mean feedback. Like, I've had people be mean to me and I'm like, okay, well, I'm never talking to them again. Like, I just can't deal with it. I'm too much of a delicate flower. And I don't think that Skye sugarcoats stuff. I think we just like communicate really well together, and like I don't have to worry about like, oh my God, Skye is going to be so mean and I have to like psych myself up to call her on the phone. Like, it's never been like that.
I never want to be mean. And I'm always trying to be like it's not hard to be like incredibly honest, but not mean. Like, I remember, there was something in Simmer Down where I was like, okay, I'm not feeling this because blah, 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 but it wasn't mean. And in the same way in, Off the Record is always my keenest memory, because there was a scene in Off the Record that had Nick doing some shenanigans with some other women, and Sarah was like, okay, I'm really sorry, but no
shenanigans. No. I will not put up with shenanigans.
Take this. She's like, Nick cannot do this. But it was like, I didn't feel any type of way as in like, oh, how dare she? I actually knew that it was a thin ice scene. And then like hearing her be like, no, it was like, all right.
It just cemented what you were like already considering.
It did.
Love it. Okay, so now that the two of you have written your first book together, I'm curious, what do you think are some of the keys to maintaining a successful and well-balanced writing partnership? Because I know for me, somebody who's super type A, that anytime I was put into like a group setting would take on the entire assignment myself. The idea of like sharing writing with somebody for me is I just don't even know how to fathom that. But I'd love to know how you made it work for the two of you.
That is a really good point, because I think for me, and I don't speak for Skye, but for me, for a really long time, I couldn't imagine writing with somebody else, because one, writing is really personal for me, but two, I just couldn't figure out the logistics of it. But as I got to know Skye and we got to be good critique partners and beta readers, I realized like it would be really fun to try to write a book together. And so we wrote Sips and Strokes last year while everybody was in quarantine, pandemic times, and like there's like nothing to do. So like, let's try to write a book, like let's do this. And surprisingly, it worked out really well. I think we just communicate really well. And I think if you can like get on the phone with somebody and email them and text them, and your communication is really good, and you're not like constantly having to track this person down, or like they say that they're going to do something and they never do it. Like, obviously getting into a project with somebody like that is going to suck, but Skye and I are not like that. So I think we took it on really well because we are so similar in that way. So we just we hopped on the phone, we fleshed out a few ideas. The one that ended up being Sips and Strokes was the one that we felt the most strongly about. And then so Sips and Strokes is dual perspective. So we each took on one of the characters and wrote their POV chapters. An alternated. Okay,
you're jumping to my next question, Sarah.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. But for us, but I guess so the way that we did it was we communicated constantly. So we would write a chunk, get on the phone, talk about how we think it went after we had read each other's chapters, and then planned out the next chunk. Like, it only took us 6 weeks to get out a first draft, which I was really impressed about.
Yeah. No, that's really impressive. I'm impressed.
I think the other part of it too, 100% on all of that, but also too, giving each other the space. Like, you know, if it was like, oh, I'm like, for me, it was like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get like the chapter finished today, I'll get it tomorrow. It's always like, it's fine. It's no worries. Like, we both know that life is happening, other projects are happening, etc. And so like, very much like, we trust each other. I think it's probably that we trust and we know each other's personalities enough to know that it's actually going to happen. So, or even like a planning session, or even now, like if we need to talk and one of us is like, look, we had planned for this afternoon. It's usually me, to be honest, but it's like, if it's planned for this afternoon, but the day has blown up, it's like, no, that's fine. We'll just do it tomorrow, because there's like, we know that we will do it tomorrow. Like, there's not like, oh, there she goes flaking again. Like, both of us, as Sarah said, are people who are like, we're like, yeah, we're going to do this thing. So there's a level of trust there that we know that we're both like committed to it, that I think really did help a lot.
Perfect. Well, okay. So I know Sarah mentioned that the two of you kind of threw a few ideas at each other. And I'd love to know just sort of like where the original idea for Sips and Strokes came from. Like, what was the inspiration for this book?
Oh my gosh. I can't think of a specific like thing that we're like, oh, we should write this. I think we were just thinking about like, okay, what are the ideas that we love? What are the tropes that we love? And I think I love fake dating, and I love I think weddings are always a fun like setting or tool in a romance. So those are the two things that I remember us being really excited about. I don't know, Skye, what else do you remember?
I remember that you had like a pocket full, if you will, of pitches, and like there were several things that you had kind of been sitting with, just very, very like a one or two sentence, like idea. And I don't remember what the actual, I'm sure I can go find it, origin was, but it was something about the fake dating, and it was something about maybe like an art teacher or something like that. And we thought that would be fun. But we had a bunch of them, and like there were a few of them we kind of came down to, and then this one just became, I don't know, it just started to grow. And so it was like, yeah, this is the one we'll take. It just kind of jumped up from there.
Love it. Love it. And again, Sips and Strokes is available April 20th, just so everybody can get their pre-orders in now. And without giving away too much information, because of course we want the people to buy the damn book, would one of you, or together, however you prefer, mind giving everyone a brief synopsis of the story?
See, now I'm sweating bullets again. I'm like, how many?
It's always hardest when it's your own book, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sarah, do you want to do it? Or I guess, I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I feel like we've talked about this so much, I don't even think it makes a difference anymore who says what. But yeah, so Sips and Strokes is a fake dating rom-com between Lily, she's an art professor, and Calder. He is a Scottish model. He's on Instagram. He also models for romance novels. Really, really hot. And so he is a model for her class, and Lily is getting sort of, strong-armed into going to her ex's wedding, which she obviously doesn't want to do, single. So she ropes Calder into being her fake date, and that's super convenient because he wants to land this very lucrative whiskey spokesperson modeling gig, and he needs to look like a very responsible, professional, relationship-minded guy for that instead of the playboy that he actually is. So they end up sort of in this fake relationship setup, but obviously they catch feelings and things get really, really hot and interesting for them.
Well done, Sarah. I think you've done it.
Thanks.
So you mentioned that you each took on one of the POVs in this book. We have Calder and we have Lily. So one of my questions was actually how the process worked for you. So now knowing that, I would love to know which one of you took on each POV.
Oh, come on. I bet you can guess.
Oh, I mean, I bet I can guess too. Do you want me to guess? Okay, I mean, I guessed that Skye wrote for Calder and Sarah wrote for Lily.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, the Scottish romance novel cover model
who enjoys whiskey.
who's obsessed with being the brand rep for a whiskey company that he grew up with. Yes, I don't know. I have some tells, I think. I was Calder. Sarah and I talked about that and how to split it up, but we thought it would be much easier to do like sort of alternate chapters and keep to the voice. That was absolutely the way we went. Of course, though, like when we were writing the chapters, like she wrote Calder's dialogue in Lily's POV, and I did the same for Lily. So that was definitely like we obviously came in and smoothed it out, but
right.
It was actually very cool to be able to see how that would come about, and then it became exciting to get her chapters because I was curious what my character was going to do next.
I really like that idea, and that's not really something that I had ever thought about before. First of all, I don't know how many authors I read that are multiple authors writing under one nom de plume. Like the only other author I can think of that I read regularly and know writes with multiple authors is Christina Lauren, but I'm sure there are plenty more out there, and I just was wondering if that was like the way to go about it, but it seems like it worked really well in this case, both as a reader and for the two of you as the writers.
I'm literally making like a yes fist when you said that as a reader, because I'm really glad that you think so too. We were really pleased with how smoothly it came out. Like even as Sarah said, like it took 6 weeks to get this book drafted, and which is amazing. But we were really, really pleased with the smoothness and like the continuity, even in the early iteration, like when the first drafts were coming through, it was like almost uncanny the way like some details she would mention, I had also kind of pointed towards that. And then we were able to just solidify it. I honestly don't know how, like I don't know how someone would, or a pair of people would do like the same character. I don't know. It's just to me, this is like the way it made sense. But yeah, I have no idea how another approach to this would be. But this one worked great for us.
Sarah, would you have ever wanted to write from Calder's point of view, or does that just seem like so outside of your POV?
Honestly, no. I did not want to write his POV. And I think that I did, like Skye said, like obviously Lily's POV, she was interacting with Calder a lot, so I'd be writing his dialogue, his action, but I wasn't like in his head, obviously. I just, I feel like it's good to know what your strengths and weaknesses are and to be willing to acknowledge them, especially in a situation where you're going to be working with somebody in tandem on a project, like writing a book together. And I knew my strength was not to try to pretend to be a Scottish whiskey drinking hottie. Like that's just not who I am, but I feel like I'm not Lily, but I'm more closely to her in that so Lily's Filipino American, like I am, has a really strong family ties. I wouldn't say that I'm like a pushover doormat that she is at sometimes, but I can relate to a lot of the family conflict that she has. So I feel like we both kind of just acknowledge like, okay, this is what we feel comfortable writing. This character and this character, it's in line with what our strengths are. And I feel like that worked out really well because they both have really distinct voices, I think, but they work well together in the story.
I agree. Well, and something else, obviously I don't want to give away too much about the book, but something else that was one of my takeaways that I wanted to praise you both for was the way that you handled female friendships in this story, because this is something that I've grown very tired of seeing, sort of like the stereotypical like mean girl in books. And I think you found a great way to push beyond that. And that's something that I've actually seen in a couple books this year and remarked on the podcast as really enjoying. And I'd love to see more of that because I'm so sick of seeing girls competing with girls.
Yeah, same. I'm so glad you said that because I feel like you're right. That's definitely what we've been exposed to. There's always like the female main character and whatever female side character she's pitted against, and that's just really unfortunate. And so in Sips and Strokes, there's Harmony, who is marrying Lily's ex, which is awkward, obviously. And she was a bully to Lily when she was a kid, which sucks. But I'm not trying to excuse people bullying because that's not okay. But I think we can all, like, even if we weren't childhood bullies to somebody, I mean, we were all probably little pieces of shit at some point in our lives. And you don't have to stay that way. Like, you could be like, hey, that sucked. I'm really sorry. I'm a better person now. Like, or, usually you act. You don't just say, hey, I'm a better person. You become a better person.
Yeah.
And I think, and not to give anything away, and I don't think it's giving anything away by saying that, you know, Harmony, the side character, goes through something to make her a better person in the end. And I think she and Lily end up in a really good place. And I think that's heartening to see, instead of like, oh, I hate her.
Yeah.
We're going to take her down, you know.
She was never an antagonist. I mean, and that's funny because she was literally the antagonist when Lily was a child.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she's definitely, I have to say, I'm excited to hear you bring that up, Kelly, because she was definitely a character who grew a lot of depth as we wrote the story. Because at first she was just kind of this like, okay, she was a bully and she was, you know, she's now this fiance, and she was never meant to be like competition, but she was definitely like sort of like a flat character. And we kept just sort of seeing a little bit more growth from her, and like seeing until the point of the end of the book. And like, of course, I want people to go and read to see how it goes. But I love that you said that, because it was exciting to get a little bit deeper into her, as opposed to just like the traditional, like, me, as you said, the mean girl. It's like, okay, we've seen that, but like everybody has a story, which I think is like a really, really nice thing. So I really enjoyed that too. That excited me as it came to be in the drafting process.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. And it's interesting because it makes me think about sort of what cancel culture is today, in just that we're so ready. I mean, I've seen a lot of discussion about cancel culture and a lot of essays about it recently, but just we're so ready to write people off for their mistakes. And I totally understand that. But at the same time, if we do see people making changes and not just saying that they're making changes and I'm going to be better, but we actually see them doing better, then I don't think it's worth, you know, quote unquote, canceling them. And so that was kind of my read of Harmony. Was I was like, you know what, if this was a different book, if this was, you know, something I had read several years back where she was just the mean girl and she gets hers in the end and karma's a bitch, you know, that would have been fine in a different time and place. But I think because the discussions we're having are evolving so much today outside of literature, it's nice to see that reflected inside what we're reading.
I love that you brought that up, because I do think like it kind of marries back into the whole idea of therapy that we were talking about. And
yes,
like, if we're not allowed to be wrong, if we're not allowed to say like, I was wrong, right? Because you can't admit that you did anything, or that you were ever, as Sarah said, we were ever a piece of shit, but kind of we all were. But like that ability to say, you know, I was wrong. I know that was shitty. Is a really, like, if we lose that, which sometimes it feels like we are, then how will we ever grow?
Yeah.
Right. So I'm super excited that you just brought that up and then tied it into that. Like, I'm like, oh my God, yes.
Oh,
yes.
Good. I have my moments, you know, it's not all the time, but well, okay. And speaking of Harmony, maybe this is me reading too much into it, but after reading Sips and Strokes, because I did finish reading it yesterday, I will say I see potential for more books in a potential series. And I'm wondering if that's something that the two of you have maybe discussed.
Well, Sarah.
Yeah, okay, so here's the thing. Like, I feel like we left things in that manner on purpose.
Okay.
In Sips and Strokes. Because, yeah, like, I feel like with a lot of romances, it's fun to sort of leave things like, oh, I wonder what happens with this character and this character. But at the same time, I'm really excited about Sips and Strokes. And I know Skye is too, and I think we're curious. So like, okay, well, how's it gonna do? Or, you know, like,
right.
You know, like, before, I guess I want to make sure that like this book gets as much attention and time as it deserves, and then maybe we'll see about doing a sequel. But it is a possibility. Did I word that correctly?
Yeah.
I will only say, that yes, we want Sips and Strokes, and having released a series within a year, like I definitely, which I have no regrets on, but I definitely want Sips and Strokes to get her time to shine. but I will admit, because this is Kelly and, we've known each other a long time now. I may or may not have poured a very large whiskey the other day after a very long day of work and then done a huge brain dump to Sarah in an email about what I could see happening in the second book. I was like, okay, so I might have just sent you something, but that you don't need to look at. And he was like, no, I totally will. So there are definitely there are possibilities there. I would be honored and thrilled to do another book, but I do want to kind of pace ourselves and make sure, Sarah has tons of writing projects and I am I have more Anti-Belle, plus I'm starting another business on the side that's not about books. So we have a lot going on, but it was so much fun that I would be very, very happy to do it again.
Well, and speaking as one of your, ARC readers, I'll be the first to say I'd love to see more in the series.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so get ready for me to start bugging you about the next book.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, well, let's set that aside. We'll put a pin in that for now and just circle back in a few months or so. But I'd love to know, following Sips and Strokes, which, again, available April 20th. I would love to know what's up next for each of you.
Yeah, well, so for me, I have another romance coming out in the fall with my publisher, Berkeley. The title is On Location. And in the next couple months, I'll have some really exciting news regarding that. So stay tuned. But that's another funny, sexy rom-com romance about people working on a outdoor television crew in Utah.
Yes.
About the national parks. Yeah. So the main character is a showrunner, and the eventual love interest is one of the crew members, and so they clash a lot, but they come together because they got to put a show together. So yeah, stay tuned for that.
Love it.
That's what I've got going on. Skye has a gazillion and one projects too.
Girl, you are not wrong. So in terms of books, I do have a goal to have book 4 of the Anti-Belle series out before the end of 2021. What book that is a good question, because technically book 4 is incomplete. And it is a friends to lovers trope, which I am not great at. I am much better with the hate to love. So I may skip over that one and do the next book in the series. But anyway, so I do have a goal to publish another Anti-Belle book this year. In the meantime, and I will be honest, Sips and Strokes is the first book that I have written right up brand new in a few years. So it was super exciting and invigorating to do. But on the side, also, I'm launching a business. It's a personal development, personal training, life coaching business called Ability. And it is, I'm, working with clients now and doing all kinds of things and writing content for that as well. So yeah, starting a business and publishing this book and finishing a school year of teaching. Yeah.
You've got plenty on your plate.
Yeah, no, but it's all very happy. And I'm very, very excited for all of it.
I'm excited for it too, and I have to tell you, Sarah, I'm super pumped for your showrunner book, because I worked in Hollywood. I'm obsessed with anything that's Hollywood related, especially reality show. I would love nothing more than to write a reality show romance novel. God, that would just make my year.
Wow. That would be amazing.
That makes me so happy. I would love to read something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll get to work.
Yes.
Hey, I have not read On Location. I got to read the opening couple of pages to confirm and check some NYC related info, which they do a brilliant job with. But I am very, very keen to read that book too, because I have not gotten to see it yet, so I'm excited.
Well, the way time passes these days, it'll be fall before we know it. So we don't have that long to wait.
I know.
So the last thing I want to ask each of you is something that I'm always curious to hear from any writer, and that is there a story that you are dying to write?
Yeah, there is. Do you mean a trope or an idea?
It could be an idea that's lurking around your brain. It could be just a character you've got in mind, but something that at some point in the near future, you just have to write.
Okay. Yeah. So for me, I've always really wanted to write like a bodyguard romance. I don't know why. Like, and that's really different from what I normally write. So I don't know. Like, I had this urge a couple months ago and I came up with an idea. I obviously have not done anything with it yet because there's just no time right now for me.
Of course.
But that, I think, I'm hoping, now that I've said it and put it out into the world, at some point that'll become something.
Manifest. I like it.
Yes.
All right, Skye, what do you think?
I want to write a women's fiction story based on some of my own personal experiences over the past few years of coming to terms with myself and what I'm really worth, like kind of really stepping into a lot of self-discovery, but I want to fictionalize it. So that is a thing that I kind of have my hopes and dreams on.
I love that.
I'm trying to like see how it would look as a story, you know, like where do you novelize? Like where do you put the fiction? Yeah. But it would be interesting.
I'm sure you'll find it. And, you know, obviously there's a big difference between that and bodyguard romance, but let me just say, I'm here to read it all.
Well, yeah, but now I'm obsessed with the idea of a reality TV show romance. So
yes.
I'm thinking about that now.
So we've all got our work cut out for us is what I'm hearing. Well, ladies, where can everybody find and follow you and keep up with all of your, you know, current and future projects?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads, LinkedIn, Facebook, and probably somewhere else at writer Skye McD. You can find us and our podcast and all of our Sarah Skye doings on Instagram at Quick and Dirty Romance and on Twitter at Quick and Dirty Rom.
Yeah, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram too. I'm at author Sarah S. And I'm on Facebook too, but I'm most active on Twitter and Instagram.
Yeah, well, because they're better.
They're better. Yeah. Facebook sucks. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Totally right.
Sorry. I'm sorry, Kelly. I didn't mean to say that on this show.
Mark Zuckerberg is always listening. Well, and can I just say the Quick and Dirty podcast is part of the Frolic Podcast Network, as is Boobies and Newbies. So you can find all your favorite romance podcasts at frolic.media. There you go. And as I mentioned, Sips and Strokes is available April 20th. Sarah and Skye have also been sweet enough to contribute a copy of Sips and Strokes to this month's 30, Flirty, and Reading giveaway. So look out for your opportunity to win that. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me. This has been an absolute treat.
Kelly, thank you so much for having us. I loved it as always.
Yeah, it was such a blast chatting with you. We love you.
Oh, yeah. I love you. And I'm already going to start sending out my emails and good vibes for book number 2 in this series. So get ready. Thanks so much for listening. Boobies and Newbies is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts. You can follow Boobies and Newbies on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Boobies Podcast.